This lecture, we're going to talk about some of the things that go on in the newborn state from birth and until later. So let's start off by talking about the APGAR test. And when the infant is born, the pediatrician will do an assessment of the infant to get the APGAR score. And we had talked about that in our last lecture. And there also is a video online for you to watch in regards to that. This test provides a quick, approximate assessment of the newborn state by focusing on the body systems needed to sustain life. So we have vital signs are muscle tone, presence of reflexes such as coughing, and skin tone. Each of those 5 scores are ranked 0, 1, or 2, with 2 being the most optimal. The 5 scores are added together. Remember, they were going to do one a minute after birth and another one at 5 minutes. So a score of 7 or more indicates the baby is in good condition. A score of 3 or less signals a life-threatening condition. Now, infants are also born with reflexes, and you also have a video on the reflexes. And let's talk about what they are. The newborns are born with a set of reflexes, and these are unlearned, unconscious responses that are triggered by a specific form of stimulation. Of course, they're involuntary, they're reflexes, they're automatic, they're necessary for survival because the infant can't communicate with you in any other way. So, we have rooting, which is rooting and sucking are designed so the infant can get the nutrients they need to grow. Blinking helps the newborn avoid unpleasant stimulation. Newborn's vision is not fully developed when they're born. We have the stepping reflex. That comes on a little bit later. Voluntary pattern of motor activity. It's a precursor to walking. Babies who actually practice the stepping reflex can walk earlier than babies who don't practice the stepping reflex. So you might want to keep that one in mind. Once they get going, oh, they're off. The Babinski reflex, that's a reflex action in which the big toe remains extended or extends itself when the sole of the foot is stimulated. Problems with the Babinski reflex could be a signal of lower spine. The Babinski reflex is with you all of your life. You no longer have that reflex, that can be a sign of a neurological issue. It could be a sign of multiple sclerosis. One of the more famous reflex is the Moro reflex. It's a startle reflex, loud noise. I'm sure most of us have seen that. The baby extends its arms, legs, and then retracts them, and they cry. And this reflex is to protect themselves. And then there's the tonic reflex, where the head is turned and the baby puts an arm up on the other side of the head. And this may prepare the baby for reaching. And the last one is the Palmer grasp. You press your finger or an object into the baby's palm, and the baby's hand will curl around that object, and that may prepare for voluntary grasping later on. So we have that. Another subject within the newborn is the newborn state. So what happens is your newborn is going to spend each day moving from one state to another. And they're going to be alert inactivity, waking activity, crying, and sleeping. So babies spend 2 to 3 hours a day crying or on the verge of crying. And there are actually 3 different types of crying. There's your basic cry, which starts soft and then becomes more intense. And the basic cry would be for hunger some kind of tiredness. And then there's a mad cry, which is a more intense version of the basic cry. And then there is the pain cry, which begins with a long, sudden burst of crying, followed by a long pause and gasping. It's important as a parent to understand these cries, or the caregiver understand these cries, because this is the initial form of communication for the infant. And if you'll recall from intro, we talked about Erik Erikson's stages of social development, psychosocial development, that trust versus mistrust is occurring at this time, and a child needs to understand that they can trust someone for their care. So if you're ignoring these cries, already you're setting a foundation for mistrust for later on. So a child is also an infant going to sleep. That is one of its other states. And so infants actually sleep 6 to 18 hours daily. Newborns go through a cycle of wakefulness and naps about every 4 hours. And as they get older, the cycle changes to a more day night cycle instead of a wakeful nap cycle. Half of baby sleep is in REM sleep, rapid eye movement. It is believed that the REM sleep cycle helps infants by providing stimulation for the brain that fosters growth to the nervous system. When a baby is born, its brain is not fully developed. It has a major burst of activity in its neural synapses, and so this REM sleep allows that growth to occur. Along with these states and the crying and the reflexes, a baby is already starting to show its temperament. And a temperament, of course, could be shy, withdrawn, extroverted, etc. So this temperament is a combination of heredity and environment. Um, they actually have a twin study that showed the same temperament in twins that were separated at birth. So it's a biological thing. And of course, a positive environment helps foster a positive temperament, i.e., fear of punishment would make a child withdrawn. So temperament is stable over the course of a lifetime. Who we are as children, we may change because of environmental and peer related reasons, but our temperament, if we're happy as a child, we're generally happy as a teenager, happy as an adult, notwithstanding, going through adolescence and puberty. But so, what happens to infants is these characteristics of infants indicate a consistent style or pattern to an infant's behavior, and collectively they define the infant's temperament. So scientists believe there are 2 to 6 dimensions of temperament, and we'll talk about those more later. And so I would say that a child could actually um, have 2 or 3 types of temperament in an infant. Think of it as surgency or extroversion is the extent of the newborn being happy. Negative effect, the extent of being angry. Some infants are angry. And effortful control is the extent to which a child can focus attention. So this is the end of this lecture, and then we will continue on in part 2.